We kick off with Quark and Dax playing Tango, although he's distracted by how his investments are doing. This is after the time when Brunt had him blacklisted so Ferengi won't do business with him, so he's been on the rocks, and his attempt to sort things out have only gotten him in worse and worse, until there's no way out of this hole that he's in. He's not only going to lose the bar, but when 3 different debtors come to collect it, they'll probably make their displeasure known in very painful ways. To prove that things can always get worse, though, Cousin Gala swings by. The same Cousin Gala who rigged Quark's ship to murder him, so this isn't a reunion to feel optimistic about. He's probably here just so he can have a good view while Quark's debtors tear him apart. After Dax leaves, Gala makes the offer. Go into business with me. The problem is, Gala's business is weapons, something that Quark isn't comfortable with, and in any case is not allowed on Deep Space Nine. But Quark is drowning and Gala has a lifeline, and with an assurance that his role isn't in handling the merchandise, Quark is seeing nothing but dollar signs. Or whatever the gold-pressed latinum symbol is, probably a naked Ferengi rolling around in money. After the titles, we start the B-plot, which is that with Keiko gone, Yoshi has been constantly crying unless O'Brien holds him. You can probably guess that this happens with Jake right now. Yoshi cry, not Jake. The kid just won't shut his trap unless Daddy is holding him, so O'Brien just tucks the kid under one arm and heads off to work, which should be fine really unless he tries breastfeeding the kid. Some people get worked up over that. Well, time for Quark to meet with his partner, Haggoth, so they can go over this new arrangement, feel each other out. Not literally, I'm assuming Haggoth is saving all that for his traveling companion there. So Quark takes him up to the holosuite to show the fine selection of weapons and targets, which I'm sure will meet with your approval. Or perhaps you have a few points of constructive criticism to offer. This is the foundation of Gala's new plan. DS9 is a safe, neutral site for parties to meet to hash out deals and examine the merchandise in a holographic recreation. Then the actual exchange can take place somewhere else, outside Federation space, so they have nothing to complain about. Haggoth is impressed, especially when Gala claims that this was all Quark's idea to get him in good with his partner. And once the job starts, Quark's people skills make him an effective salesman. Though anything that blows up killer robots with one shot pretty much sells itself. Haggoth is a cautious one, though. He even insists upon forwarding Quark's earnings directly to his creditors, because after all, a partner who is in serious debt is a partner who could potentially be compromised. And when you deal with things that can melt your face off, it's usually good to have as few surprises as possible. Not a whole lot of practical jokes in the arms business. The customer isn't going to think it's funny when their sniper rifle has a flag with bang come out the end of the weapon. So by eliminating Quark's debts, Haggoth is removing any reason that Quark might have to double-cross him at some point, since the only thing that matters to Quark is money and what it can give him. When you understand that, then everything else falls into place. Well, Quark's little me time with a beautiful lady paid enough to like his ears is interrupted by Odo.
None of these charges are going to stick. I haven't broken any laws. I have a license to run holosuites.
But you don't have a license to sell weapons, do you?
I defy you to prove that I brought a single weapon onto the station.
It's a mere technicality. We both know what you're doing.
Perhaps you've adhered to the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law is that I can lock you up if I don't like you. Well, these trumped-up charges aren't going to fly. The Bajoran government insists that this perfectly legal activity be allowed to continue. They provide one side of the issue, the fact that their revolution was a success in part thanks to arms merchants willing to risk Cardassian wrath by supplying them with weapons. A weapon in many cases is morally neutral. It can be a tool of oppression in one hand and a means of liberation in the other. Again, in many cases. Things like sarin gas obviously is a little less neutral. Nobody needs a few canisters of nerve gas to deal with burglars. Well, Sisko is not going to violate what the Bajorans want, but when Quark reacts smugly, he nearly demonstrates the fact that weapons are merely a more convenient way for Sisko to make his feelings known. Quark has got the answer to his financial problems, sure, but his relationship with the crew of this station is taking a bit of a hit over this. They all start boycotting his bar as a result. What kind of disreputable person would go to an arms dealer anyway?
I want the cannon.
What? Captain Janeway, how could you do business with arms dealers, the lowest of the low?
Hey, have a little respect. They're people just like you. People who can give me a bacteria that eats bones.
But it's unconscionable. The idea of it is repulsive.
Hey, I have the same right to self-defense as anyone else. And if I need a nuclear bomb revolver to do that, I ain't gonna find that shit at Walmart, right? Right, Captain Janeway. He's my best supplier.
But that's precisely the point. Look at him. He's a robot who wants to enslave humanity.
Hey, show me a robot who deep down doesn't want to enslave humanity.
And second, he's nothing but a vicious money-grabbing user. His name is Swindle, for Christ's sakes.
Hey, that doesn't prove anything. It could mean my prices are so good you're practically swindling me by buying my death ray. Now, if my name was Swindler, then I'll admit you'd have a point. Heh, let's see him try to weasel out of that one.
Well, while the trio celebrate Haggoth's forward thinking in dealing with the Bajorans, the mood quickly turns sour when a matter of business comes up. Haggoth's called in Farak, one of the associates, because the guy has screwed up some deals, including choosing to go to Ryza instead of opening negotiations with a client like he's supposed to. And whatever else you think, Haggoth has got a point on that one. When you've already screwed up two things, you don't shirk the third to head to the Bunny Ranch. So while he's fired, Quark is going up in the world. The bar may be doing poorly, but Gala soon reveals the reason that he's brought Quark in. He wants to step back and was grooming someone to take his place. And we get a sense of why Gala took that approach, because Farak just met with an unfortunate accident involving a malfunctioning warp core. What are the odds of that, huh? Right after he was yelled at. I understand the last guy that crossed Haggoth accidentally fell down a turbolift shaft onto a dozen knives. Front and back. Freak accident. It happens. Quark stops and talks with Dax. Not that she wants to. She's pissed that he's lining his pockets while people die. Though he insists his weapons are made strictly to protect people. They're doing a fine job of protecting him at the moment, anyway. But she won't have anything to do with Quark, so he throws himself back into his work, preparing the most exquisite meal for the coming regent, though Haggoth seems unhappy.
Here we are, about to open negotiations with an important new client, and this is the welcome you're prepared to give him?
They told me he'd like it.
This! He's going to like this!
Man, y'all take this shit seriously.
Well, he should. It's delicious.
I guess I was wrong about the practical joke thing. When matters of life and death aren't enough, sometimes you've got to liven things up. One of these glasses of wine are poisoned. Guess which one? I think you'll be amused. So the Regent shows up, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that he was veteran character actor Lawrence Tierney, although he just had had a stroke so he couldn't remember his lines. A challenge for Siddig, who was doing his first time directing.
Most arms dealers wouldn't understand such considerations. They have no ideals, no passions except for lining their own pockets. I always felt you were a man of honor. You're all men of honor.
Now let's get down to the mass murder. The Regent is peeved that his protege has turned against him and declared her planet independent, so he wants an example made of the general. 8 million examples to be exact, with 20 more million examples to follow, so make sure that no one missed the first example. And while it's true that the best defense is a good offense, it's hard to think of it as a preventative bioagent attack wiping out 28 million people as self-defense. To reiterate, no one ever said, "Honey, I think there's a prowler. Grab the anthrax." Quark is aghast at this. It's hard when you're a people person to think about slaughtering large numbers of people, so after the meeting, Gala swings by to chew him out over his behavior.
This Regent is insane. Stop being so judgmental. It's his bank account, not his mental health you should be concerned with.
It's crazy too. Crazy rich! DS9 was often inspired by classic films, so it's no surprise that Gala draws upon Orson Welles in The Third Man, commenting on how unnoticeable it would be if just one of those stars out there were to go out, how life would pretty much go on as normal if that happened. And compared to that, one city being devastated by bioagents is even less of an issue.
Suppose I offered you 10 million bars of gold-pressed latinum to help turn out one of those lights, would you really tell me to keep my money?
One of the strengths of business as usual is its willingness to play Ferengi straight for a change, instead of making it all a comedy. Quark has always operated in a morally gray area, but generally his crimes have either been of the victimless type or ripping somebody off. But those are pretty much his limit. Making money off foolish rules or foolish people, that's all well and good. And while you'd argue that harm is done by this, it's not direct harm. It's not breaking bones or snuffing out lives. It's just business that happens to be against the law. Being someone who watched slow-motion genocide from a balcony seat is going to make you either desensitized or more aware of the value of life. That's why Gala can't imagine anyone saying no to 10 million bars no matter what it took. While just the thought of it gives Quark a nightmare, even if it is a rather ham-fisted one.
Way to go, Quark. I had my whole life ahead of me.
I didn't do anything!
You killed us all.
Now hold on.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Can't blame me.
Deny it all you want. You're responsible.
I hope it was worth it.
How much latinum did they pay you? Enough to buy a new conscience?
Why, Quark?
Why'd you use the last roll of toilet paper and not get another roll, monster? Quark wakes up screaming in horror, and not just because there's no customers in his bar either. He can't live with the thought of being a party to something like that. So he plans to do something about it. He gives Dax his Tongo wheel, which she is not thrilled at, although breaking into her quarters to give it to her didn't really set the mood.
Don't you want to know where it is I'm going?
Not really.
Oh, this played out a lot differently in my head. For one thing, you're not dressed as a Dabo girl.
The worst Haggoth can do is kill you. What's one life compared to the lives of 28 million people?
But it's mine. So Quark tells Haggoth that the bioweapon is unavailable. Backorder, you know how these things are. Not a big stockpile after all. Think of some of the dumbasses you've had at your workplace. Would you want to have a skin-melting virus within reach of people who don't even know how to refill the coffee pot? But Quark has a backup plan, a Valaxian brew that just might do the job. The Regent will have to stick around for that, and in the meantime, Quark has invited that wayward general and her leadership to the station as well. Gala talked previously about all the profits to be made selling weapons to both sides. So Quark says he's just following that example. He'll get this new cocktail for her too. So he arranges for both to wind up in the same cargo bay at the same time, along with Gala and Haggoth.
Attention all personnel! There are reports of phaser fire in Cargo Bay 5. Come on, seal the area!
Now, if you shoot each other now, you won't get the chance to poison each other later. Well, during all this, there have been numerous incidents with Chief and Yoshi, but now Worf swings by wondering what's going on. Sisko gave O'Brien a few days' leave when he caught the Chief leaving Yoshi down in the pit while working. Well, the only other thing that will settle him down is Worf, because he's so tender. So that just leaves wrapping things up with Quark, who gets called in by Sisko because, while he did manage to get the Regent killed and leave Gala and Haggoth far too busy for the future trying to escape the General's murder squads to seek revenge against him, the place did get shot up pretty good.
That much.
That much.
Well, maybe we could come up with some sort of installment plan.
Works for me.
Post-episode follow-up, annoying character goes to Farak. This guy was already lifeless. Killing him took away very little. Final score for business as usual is 6 out of 10, a slightly stronger than usual outing for DS9 because he used Quark as a character rather than a caricature. It showed that there are indeed lines that his character refuses to cross, but also shows a certain nobility in his willingness to risk himself to save the lives of people that he has never and will never meet. It's something that any of the other characters would almost certainly do, sure, but remember, he has no oath or duty to uphold. He's just a civilian with his own problems. That makes it a different thing. The episode's weakness is probably that this is Siddig's first job directing, and I think it shows. Haggoth is a bit too over the top, while Farak, as stated, is pretty lifeless for a guy who just royally screwed up, and combined with some questionable positioning of the camera, suggests that he was struggling a bit with his initial attempt at the job. The plot with O'Brien is harmless filler, but filler nevertheless. Ultimately, this episode is a serviceable example of Deep Space Nine.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
Don't be so gloomy. After all, it's not that awful. Well, what the fella said. In Italy, for 30 years under the Borgias, they had warfare, terror, murder, and bloodshed, but they produced Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and the Renaissance. In Switzerland, they had brotherly love. They had 500 years of democracy and peace, and what did that produce? The cuckoo clock.